Problems leading to change. So keep in mind right here, we're going to still be under the Articles of Confederation at this point. So just be keeping that in the back of your mind as I'm going through all these issues. So basically, after the American Revolution, both the Americans and Great Britain are going to violate the Treaty of Paris. And then they're going to use the excuse that the other side violated the treaty to justify their own violation. So, for instance, the British are going to claim that Americans had violated the treaty on they were not paying their pre-war debts, which they were supposed to be, and with their treatment of loyalists to justify their own violation of the treaty being that the British then would take those who had been formerly enslaved in America without compensation. And then we see American states were slow to return land to loyalists. And so then the British would say, oh, well, fine then. And they would actually go on to hold on to forts in the West that they had promised to relinquish in the treaty. We're seeing here, once again, the British had this overall strategy to keep the United States weak, divided, and small. Now, the thing is, the fact that the British had a presence in the American West, first of all, it effectively shut the Americans out of fur trade with Native Americans. But also, it was just a huge insult to the sovereignty of the United States, and it threatens the security of the northern frontier, because the British would openly encourage secessionist movements in the Northwest and different areas. And they actually almost backed a secessionist movement in Vermont during the 1780s. They chose not to at the last moment because they were worried it might push America into a war with Great Britain. But really, as much as those things were problematic, it was Great Britain's retaliatory trade policies that were the gravest threat to American society. John Adams was actually the minister to London during this time, and he would come to the conclusion that Great Britain is never going to lift their trading and shipping restrictions on the United States until forced to do so by some sort of uniform American system of like discriminatory duties on British goods. Now that sounds great in theory, but America could not do this under the Articles. I mean, remember, just even doing a 5% tax on imported goods never could make it through. And so retaliatory navigation acts did occur at the individual state level, but this was no good because the British would basically play one state off of each other and like ship goods through less restrictive areas, less restrictive states. I should also mention Spain. Spain very much wanted a buffer zone between Louisiana and Florida in their possessions. Ignore my son if you hear them. And basically neither side would recognize boundaries of the United States in the treaty. I'm going to go ahead and pause this. Okay, I'm going to go back to Spain here really quick. So Spain wanted a buffer zone between their Louisiana and Florida possessions and America. And so you can see that area that's claimed by both the United States and Spain here. Basically, Spain would not recognize the boundaries of the United States from the Treaty of Paris. And they also, on top of that, denied the United States the claim of free navigation up the length of the Mississippi River, which is extremely important for trade because you can ship items so much faster at this time over water channels than over land. We also see that the Spanish are going to use natives against the Americans in alliance systems in different areas. And Spain as well tries to play the northern states off of the southern states. In 1786, they decided that they would try to offer trading concessions with the Spanish Empire with the United States, but in turn, the United States had to surrender their claim to the Mississippi River for the next 30 years. Now, this would have affected the southern states a whole lot more due to that was a way that they could have shipped items way faster to the market and everything. And so Southern congressmen are going to come together and unite to defeat this treaty. This does not go into place. And so you really have this sense of crisis in 1786 that we're seeing more and more numbers are growing in the United States, believing that only a radical political change could actually preserve the Republic and fulfill the promise of its greatness from, the whole Revolutionary War. So there's problems. Just listing all of these problems. Unpaid debts, social unrest, squabbling between the states, sectional hostilities. There's the whole uncertain status of the West, partly because, Great Britain's out there. Blocked channels of trade, foreign intrigues, lack of centralized authority and purpose. So we have all these problems. And in 1786, there is the Annapolis Convention in Maryland. The thing is, barely any of the states actually showed up for this convention because a lot of people believed, oh, it's fine, we're not gonna change anything. So at this convention, they said, fine, we're gonna go on to devise some sort of further provisions to render the Constitution of the federal government adequate, but we need more people to come, so we're gonna go ahead and set up another convention to meet at Philadelphia in 1787. However, this convention that occurs in Philadelphia in 1787, they're not going to just amend the Articles of Confederation. They're going to basically forge an entire new framework of governance in the United States. They're going to form the Constitution. Now, the thing is, this is great timing because you might go, well, what happens between 1786 and then 1787? Shays' Rebellion, where you have literal farmers taking up arms against a state government. And this really had strengthened the case for nationalists going, we need a more centralized authority. And so what happens is for the Philadelphia Convention, all states but Rhode Island send delegates. Now, right away, you might be going, wait a second, under the Articles, technically you're not supposed to amend anything unless it's a unanimous consent. So you can see that problematic with the Articles already. Now, the men that show up at this convention in Philadelphia, now they're chiefly lawyers by training or by profession. Most of the 55 men there served in the Confederation Congress, and actually more than 1/3 of them had fought during the Revolutionary War. Now, these men were extremely well educated by the standards of that day. They were not just the intellectual elite, but they were also the political and economic elite. These men as a group were far wealthier than your average American. At least 19 of them had enslaved people, and their greatest asset was their common commitment to a nationalist solution that they see with this crisis of confidence that's gripping the Republic at this time. The people that were strong supporters of the Articles of Confederation, the people who liked the Articles of Confederation, they don't attend. They refuse to attend this.